Hello everybody and welcome to a list video. Something I haven't really done before on this channel with the year I've been doing this. Good lord, it's already been a year. Time really flies. So considering that this year was the end of the 2010s as we know them, I decided that instead of doing a Game of the Year list like most people do, I would do a Games of the Decade list. Now, it should be noted that this is my personal thoughts on it. These are my personal thoughts on these, and I have a different way of judging games of the decade than I would say game of the year, right? Game of the year for me is something like a game that excelled above and beyond the expectations and the idea of being an excellent game in terms of quality. It's something that excelled beyond that and just became glorious and amazing. It's why I don't think Sekiro deserves Game of the Year for 2019, because I think it was a really good game. Didn't really go that far beyond that, you know? I think Smash Bros. Should have won that. But anyway, for Games of the Decade, I mainly look at not just its quality, but also the legacy it left behind. What did it end up causing, you know? What's the kind of impact it left on the games industry in the 2010s, right? Trendsetters, foundation builders, benchmark creators, that kind of thing, you know? Alright. So, with that out of the way, oh, and also, naturally, I'm not going to get every single impactful game on this list. Naturally, this is only 10 games. Most articles you see out there have like 100. So, you know, you can always type in the comments, oh, but what about this game? Well, I just didn't decide to include it. I might agree with you, I might not. I just didn't decide to include it for some reason. So yeah, anyway, let's start off with the obvious, Minecraft. Of course I was going to bring up Minecraft. You can't not bring up Minecraft when you talk about video games in the 2010s. Minecraft, it exploded the 2010s. When Minecraft exploded, it became one of the first, not first necessarily, but it became a household name. There's barely anyone in in a ton of the world, really, that even some of the most isolated people who have not the most isolated people, but in terms of video games, people who haven't touched video games much, they know what Minecraft is. People know what Minecraft is. They know what the block aesthetic. They know what Steve looks like, even if they don't know its name. They know what a creeper is, you know? They might not know the names or anything like that, but they know Minecraft. They know Minecraft. They can recognize Minecraft at a glance. It's become this almost ubiquitous video game that really was, I guess you could say, the pinnacle of the indie renaissance, if you want. I'll get into the indie renaissance later in this video, but it was the pinnacle of the indie renaissance, right? This decade, was the indie renaissance. Indie games exploded, became huge. Everyone's trying to make their own game, and Minecraft hit things perfectly, hit the nail on the head, and it is now a household name, even by some of the most gaming illiterate people out there. They know what Minecraft is. And everyone has been trying to be Minecraft. The amount of Minecraft imposters that exist out there is evidence of that, right? Just look on the Xbox Live Arcade for the 360. So many Minecraft clones out there. Yeah. Survival, crafting, open world. That Minecraft set the foundation for that. Survival, open world crafting game where you have a food bar. Oh man, every game tried to be a survival open world after Minecraft came around, you know? So yeah, that's just the obvious. Now, onto one that I don't see mentioned very often, at least in some of these articles, not very highly. Skyrim. Now, before anyone starts going off in the comments about how Skyrim's a bad game, Skyrim's crappy, look at all these videos about how terrible Skyrim's design is. I know. I know, Skyrim's design in retrospect is very questionable. Very questionable. But you have to look back on what happened with it, right? It came out in 2011, the beginning of the decade. Almost the beginning of the decade. And it set the bar for what fantasy games, or at least big budget fantasy games, would try to be throughout the decade. All the fantasy games were trying to be Skyrim, you know? Everything wanted to be Skyrim. Have the huge open world, have the customizable whatevers, classes, races, whatever. Everyone wanted to hit Skyrim levels of popularity. Skyrim exploded. Even more than Oblivion could dream of exploding. And it skyrocketed Bethesda games all the way up to the top. And then as the decade progressed, Bethesda immediately started to shoot right back down into the bottom. And we've seen them hit rock bottom now at the end of the decade with Fallout 4 and Fallout 76. Oh boy. But yeah, Skyrim really set the bar. It picked off a lot of fantasy trends, mainly the open world trend. The open world trend. You want a fantasy game? It's going to be a fantasy open world now, you know, because everyone wants it to be Skyrim. Everyone wants it to be a big old fantasy open world like Skyrim, regardless of any design pitfalls that Skyrim faced because of it. So yeah, I'd say Skyrim was a game that defined the 2010s. Definitely. Especially since, man, when I was looking this up, it kind of hit me that Skyrim came out in 2011. It doesn't feel like it did. Not anymore. It feels like it came out in 2009 or something. But no, this decade. 2011. Yeah. It's just one of those games. Ooh. And speaking of which, on the open world front, Grand Theft Auto 5, yep. If it wasn't a first-person fantasy game trying to be open world, it was a third-person city game trying to be open world. Yeah. Grand Theft Auto 5 was 2013. You think about that? Grand Theft Auto 5 has been around for that long. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. But yeah, Grand Theft Auto 5, it's again, this is one of those things where regardless of how good you think the game actually is, it changed things, you know? It set trends. You know, if you were making a now, I would say GTA's people have been trying to rip off GTA for a while, but GTA 5 really kicked things into high gear for this decade. I'm probably going to be saying that a lot. But yeah, you get, the Saints Row games would try to parody it, and you got a bunch of other games all trying to either reinvent the Grand Theft Auto 5 formula or just try to be Grand Theft Auto 5. And you can see it just by the third-person shooter criminal game set in a big city that's totally not New York or LA. You just had that. People were trying to rip off GTA 4 before that, and with GTA 5, people wanted to rip them off. That's just kind of how it goes, and GTA 5 is another one of those games that's just turned almost ubiquitous for most people who just commonly play video games, right? Most people have Grand Theft Auto 5 somewhere. It's one of those games. Just like how most people have some copy of Skyrim somewhere, and most people have a copy of Minecraft somewhere. It's just one of those games, It's one of those games you can't, that feel like they've always been there, even though they only came out this decade. And it's weird that it only came out this decade now. So yeah. Also note, when I say this decade, I mean the 2010s, not... I know it's technically 2020, meh. Anyway, on to the next game, Dark Souls. Yeah, of course it was going to be Dark Souls. The entire Dark Souls franchise started in the 2010s. What was it, 2012, 2011, maybe 2013? I can't remember. It was early 2010s, I know that. The first game, early 2010s. And, I mean, what is there to say that hasn't already been said? Or isn't already commonly said by everybody, is the fact that people call games Dark Souls-like, where they say a really hard game is the Dark Souls of blank all the time now. You know, people will just compare hard games to Dark Souls now, and if you try to make a game that is difficult, has a depressing fantasy atmosphere, or anything like that, people are going to compare it to Dark Souls. It's inevitable at this point. The Dark Souls light subgenre of video games is just a thing now because of these games. You can't really escape it. Stuff like Nioh and Sekiro, they wouldn't have happened without Dark Souls paving the way for it in the first place, you know? So yeah, I'd say Dark Souls, not just 1, 2, or 3, but the entire franchise, really, was a defining game in the 2010s. Much like Zelda Breath of the Wild. I know this is an odd choice, considering I don't think Breath of the Wild really... I'm not looking at this one from a an overall industry standpoint, if you will, because really, yeah, there's not much industry-wise that it's had an impact on. There's not that many games around trying to actively be inspired by this game. Primarily, I think because a lot of Breath of the Wild is inspired by other open-world fantasy RPGs and is just trying to give it a Zelda spin. But being that it was a Nintendo Switch launch title, it made sure the Switch was around long enough to really cement itself as a next-gen console, you know? And personally, I think the Nintendo Switch is one of, if not the best console that has ever been made. I mean, it's got the power of a home console that you can just carry around wherever you go, right? And you needed a game that could keep people's interest and give them a chance to really see that functionality. And Breath of the Wild was that game. Breath of the Wild managed to catch people's attention, got people to buy Switches, and try the game on the Switch and start to realize, hey, this is a really good console. And now the Switch, years later, is here to stay. And I'm thinking it's here to stay for a long while. So yeah, Zelda Breath of the Wild, big game defining in the 2010s. I'd say late 2010s. Considering what, this game came out 2016, 2017? Yeah. Well, it was a Switch launch title, so like 2017. And next up on our little list here, we've got Warframe. Yep, this is my bias coming in. I like Warframe. I enjoy Warframe. But did you remember that Warframe came out in 2013? Yeah, it went over my head too. Warframe is another one of those foundation setters, if you will. Right? Warframe's one of those games, regardless of the quality. Personally, at least for me, there has been a bit of a drop in quality lately with some of these updates. But overall, Warframe's, I think, still a pretty good game. But the real thing I'm here to talk about is this whole trend of MMO light games. You know, these games that they don't really have the power to be World of Warcraft or Guild Wars 2, you know, where they're massive worlds that people just casually walk through and do adventures in and whatnot. Whereas in MMO Lite, you get the feeling of an MMO where you just run into random players or you squad up with players you know and do stuff, but it's all in little instanced missions with loot and whatnot. You know, it's got the looting mechanics of, say, something like Borderlands or just a casual MMO, but it's also, well, stylized like an MMO in the sense that you've got guilds, global chats, you know, various kinds of chats, trading, a player economy, all that kind of thing. It's a weird, it created a new little subgenre of MMOs for the people who really can't or don't want to create the massive worlds of World of Warcraft and whatnot. And I mean, hey, without Warframe, we probably wouldn't have gotten the inspiration for Bungie to make Destiny. And my father's very happy about that one. He really likes Destiny. But yeah, we wouldn't have people like Bungie trying out this idea now if Warframe hadn't proved that you can make it a success. And it also proved that you can make a free-to-play game that doesn't try to squeeze every money out of every bit of every bit of coin out of you like you're some kind of drug addict. So yeah. And on to the next game, we've got The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, which I know, it's a meme. It sounds like a meme. I'm not gonna be here to be, Reddit and lick the boots of The Witcher, right? It's like it's a good game, although I think Reddit worships it a bit too hard. They lose their minds over this game. It's not as amazing as they say it is, but it's still a great game. And I think in the long run, it's introduced a lot of people to European games. A lot of obscure European games. Ever since Witcher 3 came out, there's been a hike in the interest over here in the West of Eastern European games, Polish games, Ukrainian games, Romanian, Hungarian, that kind of area. The Slavic games, especially. Just European in general. I don't want to get too specific, but just European games in general have seen a growing audience, and I think a lot of that is because of The Witcher. Because The Witcher exploded, gained massive sales, it's gained massive popularity. I mean, honestly, Reddit's worship of this game has kind of helped contribute to it, as much as I begrudge against that. But yeah, Witcher 3, definitely a defining game of the 2010s. I wouldn't say the defining game of the 2010s, but an aspect of it. Just with just the impact that it had on European games in general. Next up is Stardew Valley. Yeah. This is an interesting one, because it's another part of the indie renaissance that I mentioned earlier. And Stardew Valley took a different turn from a lot of indie games. A lot of indie games either tried to be scary, spooky, or either Minecraft, scary, spooky, Terraria, or something like that. More like an actual adventure, if not a scary game, kind of thing. Stardew Valley took a whole left turn and just went into relaxing farming simulator. Right? We haven't had that kind of game grow in popularity for a long time. The oldest ones I can remember are like Harvest Moon and whatnot, But now, Stardew Valley came out, and suddenly everyone seems pretty alright with the idea of just a relaxing game where you don't do much. You just sit around, farm, build, do whatever. We're starting to see inspirations crop up, like My Time at Portia, which tries to give it a more fantasy twist, or Graveyard Keeper, which is basically Stardew Valley, but instead of running a farm, you run a graveyard. Yeah. Yeah, that's effectively why I think Stardew Valley is a big deal in the overall scheme of things. We've got relaxing, quiet games again. We haven't had those in a while before this happened, or at least we never saw them really grow and become a trend, become popular, Yeah. And up next, yeah. You think I forgot about this one, did you? Amnesia, The Dark Descent. Oh, where to begin with this? Oh boy. Amnesia. How do I explain this? So aside from the fact that it's basically the sole reason that PewDiePie exists as the largest YouTuber on the planet, no T-Series doesn't count, YouTube. What else can I say that hasn't been pointed out before? I mean, without Amnesia and the fact that everyone started playing it, the horror game, the growth of horror games wouldn't have happened. This probably wouldn't be a generation of games that were defined by the horror genre, or the indie horror genre especially, without Amnesia. Without people like PewDiePie, Markiplier, Jacksepticeye, everyone. Without people trying to play Amnesia all the time, we wouldn't have seen the growth of horror games, really. After we got this, we got, the Outlast games, We got every single, like, shovelware horror game, everyone trying to make spooky games all the time, even people trying to make spooky games in, like, Gmod. Everyone tried to make a horror game. Until Dawn, there's another one for you, Until Dawn. Five Nights at Freddy's. Five Nights at Freddy's. You know? I would include Five Nights at Freddy's on this list, but without Amnesia, we probably wouldn't have Five Nights at Freddy's, or at least we wouldn't have Five Nights at Freddy's become the phenomenon that it is, or was, I should say, in the 2010s. So yeah, Amnesia, The Dark Descent, that really defined the 2010s. And next up, I believe this is my last one, and this is my interesting pick. Limbo. Y'all remember Limbo? Came out in 2010. Limbo, I'd say Limbo was the real beginning of the indie renaissance, as I was mentioning before. A huge part of this decade was defined by the indie renaissance. The fact that indie games, independent games made by small teams of people, were suddenly getting released all the time and gaining mass popularity all over the place, right? Everyone's trying to be an indie developer now in this decade, or in the previous decade, everyone was trying to be an indie developer. And I think Limbo was the spark that ignited the fire of the indie renaissance. Now, I will say a lot of people attribute this spark to Braid, a game that came out in 2008. But personally, looking at the history of the indie renaissance, I believe Braid was the beginning, just because it was the first one to really get that ball rolling. It wasn't really the one that really created the Renaissance as we understand it. It was a progenitor to the Renaissance we eventually got, and that Renaissance would come with the creation of Limbo, because out of all the indie games that came out after Braid, Limbo was the one that got promoted everywhere. It was the one that blew up. It got picked up by, personally, in my memory, I specifically remember it being everywhere on the Xbox Live Arcade, in the 360 days. Oh man, Limbo was shown everywhere. You couldn't escape seeing Limbo footage advertised on the arcade, shown in YouTube videos, everywhere. You could not escape Limbo. And that's because it proved that a small team with enough dedication and a creative vision can make something truly great. And with that, everyone tried to become that small team. So yeah, Limbo, that's my final pick for a game that defined the 2010s in general. And that's my list. Feel free to post comments about other games you think define the 2010s, because again, there's no guarantee that I absolutely made a perfect list here. I absolutely did not. I could not get every single game that defined the culture of 2010s in video games here, just because it's 10 games. Like I said, that's why most articles have 100. So yeah, feel free to leave comments what games you think also help define the 2010s, and what you think of my explanations for some of this list. I'd be interested in hearing about that. So yeah, that's the list. That's my video. Yeah, that's all I gotta say, really. This is TheRatMan, and see y'all through the next year. Goodbye.